A silent deception is operating inside the modern retirement industry. It doesn't scream at you, and it doesn't look dangerous. In fact, it usually arrives disguised as highly responsible, cautious, and helpful financial advice. But this advice implants a specific fear, the belief that you are permanently falling behind. It suggests that no matter how much you save, you are somehow failing a test you didn't know you were taking. That anxiety has a real cost. It claims the most vibrant years of a person's life, replaces mental peace with chronic stress, and delays the freedom they have already earned. If you feel exhausted by this chase, it isn't a personal failure. It is the result of internalizing a belief system that measures your worth by the distance to an ever-receding goal line. We can stop that cycle by looking at a single, verifiable reality that the standard retirement narrative tends to ignore. To understand this, we have to stop looking at retirement as a series of banking targets and start looking at how it functions as a structural system. Recognizing this illusion is how you begin to protect the years of your life that the financial industry continues to demand from you. Right now, millions of retirees are living through their later years without the constant threat to financial collapse. But look at the gap in this data. On one side, the required minimum pushed by financial institutions. On the other, the actual median savings of currently satisfied retirees. The people actually living the life are doing it with a fraction of what the industry claims is necessary. These two realities are incompatible. If those massive targets were truly the baseline for survival, the people on the right side of this chart shouldn't be thriving. This discrepancy shatters the logic of the industry standard rules. When actual human data consistently fails to meet the industry's absolute requirements, it suggests those required numbers aren't universal laws of survival, they are marketing targets. If a multi-million-dollar portfolio was a genuine requirement for a stable life, we would be witnessing a massive visible crisis of destitution among the current elderly population. Instead, sociological surveys show that millions of retirees who never hit those headline numbers report high levels of life satisfaction. Their stability isn't a result of luck or self-delusion. It comes from a financial structure that functions differently than the one most banks want you to focus on. The massive savings milestone fails to predict the actual well-being of retirees. It is a benchmark that doesn't reflect how people actually survive and thrive. If the data doesn't support the headline number, why does the financial industry continue to push it so aggressively? The anxiety of reaching an impossible milestone has a very specific effect. It keeps people trapped in the labor force far longer than their actual cost of living might ever require. By framing safety as a distant, massive milestone, the system ensures a steady supply of labor, regardless of whether that extra work is actually necessary for the individual. To be clear, this is an educational framework to help you ask better questions. It is not financial advice, not legal or tax advice, or personal Social Security advice. This trap is effective because it uses your natural desire for security to keep you generating value for the system long after reaching a functional threshold of safety. The headline number is a flawed metric. It doesn't tell you if you are safe. It only tells you how much capital you've accumulated for the bank to manage. Real security in retirement is driven by an entirely different mechanism, a way of managing cash flow and risk that has very little to do with the total size of your savings account. Because the institutions that manage your money profit from your ongoing contributions, they have little incentive to explain how this alternative mechanism works, leaving the most important part of the retirement equation out of the conversation entirely. Open any standard retirement calculator, input your age and income, and watch the screen generate a number that immediately makes your stomach drop. For many, checking their financial progress feels exactly like taking a test they already know they failed. The targets are staggering. Whether the calculator spits out a requirement of $500,000 or tens of billions of Vietnamese dong, the sheer scale of the final sum ensures the finish line always looks completely out of reach. We tend to treat these massive milestones as objective facts of the universe. We assume they are as permanent and mathematically sound as the laws of gravity or the conservation of energy. But those astronomical targets were not discovered by a physicist. They were carefully designed by human beings. Specifically, they were built by a financial industry that generates immense profit from keeping consumers in a perpetual state of financial panic. That constant gnawing feeling of falling behind on your retirement plan is not a symptom of poor personal planning. It is the intended result of a highly successful business strategy. To understand the mechanics of this strategy, look closely at the window of a car sitting in a dealership lot. Right there on the glass is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. The sticker is printed in bold, highly official text, projecting an air of absolute finality. Yet anyone who has ever bought a vehicle knows the unwritten rule of the lot. Almost no one actually hands over the exact amount printed on that glass. There are hidden discounts, various dealer incentives, and plenty of room to negotiate. The sticker does not represent the real cost. It exists to plant a very high number in your brain, a psychological baseline known as an anchor. Once that anchor is firmly set, your perception of value shifts completely. If you negotiate the price down by 5%, you feel like you've won a massive victory for yourself, even if the dealer's markup guarantees you are still mathematically overpaying. Apply that exact same psychological mechanism to your financial planning. That terrifying multi-million-dollar retirement goal is the MSRP of your life. It does not reflect the nuanced reality of how you actually live. Its primary job is to establish an intimidating baseline that dictates how you view every dollar you earn. Internalizing this massive anchor distorts your daily decisions. A minor dip in the stock market stops looking like a routine technical correction and starts feeling like an existential threat. Buying a cup of coffee comes with a whispered echo of guilt about falling behind. The industry's core model is assets under management. Firms take a percentage of your total assets. By placing a towering goal marker far above your current wealth, the system forces you to continuously add to your pile, widening the manager's fee pipe proportionally. Maximizing your sense of urgency is highly profitable. The harder you sprint to hit that distant number, the more of your capital you lock into their ecosystem. The industry's revenue growth requires you to continuously believe that your current savings are simply not enough. This relentless pressure alters behavior. We second-guess our financial competence and routinely delay the legitimate joys of the present moment for a future that constantly recedes. People end up tethered to exhausting, high-stress jobs years longer than actual living expenses dictate, solely because they believe their safety net is inadequate. There is a sharp divide between what the firm wants and what you actually need. The asset manager's objective is the infinite expansion of total wealth. Your objective is peace of mind. Finding true security means actively blocking out the industry's terrifying engineered targets. Real financial safety starts when you strip away the flashy benchmarks and look directly at the specific, practical equation of your own household. At some point, the financial industry pulled off a very quiet, very effective trick. They shifted the definition of security from the money flowing in to the total amount sitting in a vault. They took a highly practical, grounding question, how much cash do I need to cover my life each month, and swapped it for something entirely different. What is the massive multi-million-dollar number I need sitting in my bank account? That subtle swap strips away your baseline logic. Instead of managing a predictable flow of daily expenses, you find yourself chasing an abstract, moving target. You measure your safety against a mountain of cash that always seems a decade out of reach, locking your brain into a state of constant financial panic. Look at these market graphs. You tie your entire sense of security to a single static asset pile. And because that massive lump sum is exposed to the markets, your peace of mind is forced to violently tick up and down alongside line graphs you cannot control. Every time the market dips, you calculate how many months of your future just vanished. No matter what your actual paycheck looks like or how comfortably you live today, staring at that distant, giant number ensures you always feel behind schedule and financially inadequate. The multi-million-dollar target functions as an engineered illusion, manufacturing the sense of insecurity required to keep capital moving through the financial system. To dismantle that anxiety, we have to look at the actual mechanics of how financial safety operates. True security is a two-part system. The first part is what you usually focus on, the asset pile. This includes your savings, your stocks, and your liquid cash. It acts as a large battery, a static store of potential energy. But batteries drain, and if your expenses run high, that pile depletes rapidly. The second part is the income floor. This is the recurring monthly cash flow that arrives in your account regardless of what the stock market is doing today. Look at this diagram. While the asset pile sits completely passive in its reservoir, the income floor operates as a tireless mechanical pump. It injects new lifeblood into your accounts on a fixed date every single month, totally immune to Wall Street panics. This flow comes from concrete sources. It is a state pension, Social Security, reliable rental income, or even a low-stress part-time job you maintain just to keep the pump primed. Society demands you obsess over the static reservoir, but when you map out the daily reality of paying for groceries, electricity, and shelter, the mechanical pump of the income floor is actually bearing the structural weight of your survival. If that steady cash flow is doing all the heavy lifting, the logical question is why we almost completely ignore it when calculating our security. It comes down to a sensory glitch in human perception. Because your Social Security benefits or your pension do not show up as a 7-figure balance at the top of your banking app, your brain categorizes them as minor allowances. You see a few $100s a week and dismiss it as pocket change. To fix that glitch, try buying that exact same cash flow on the open market. If you wanted a private financial institution to guarantee you $1,000 a month for the rest of your life, adjusting upward for inflation every year, you would have to hand them a massive amount of cash today. Watch the scale. You would need hundreds of thousands of dollars in upfront capital just to generate that seemingly small monthly drip. That is the true capitalized weight of your steady cash flow. When you reave that guaranteed income out of your personal calculations simply because it doesn't look like a lump sum, you manually delete your most reliable shield from the equation. You fail to price your invisible assets correctly, artificially shrinking your own net worth on paper. By doing so, you manufacture a profound, completely unnecessary sense of vulnerability. When you accurately price your income floor, the math of survival changes. The necessity of the massive lump sum begins to look different. Look closely at the standard ideal, someone sitting on a massive asset pile but carrying high monthly expenses and no guaranteed income. Face a market crash, medical emergency, or job loss, their cash burn rate accelerates, and that giant pile collapses with terrifying speed. Compare that to a person holding only a modest asset pile, but who has built an unbreakable income floor and keeps their monthly living costs low. Their base survival is already funded before they even touch their savings. Understanding the capitalized weight of those recurring dollars completely alters your math. You do not need to accumulate $2 million if your steady cash flow already covers 90% of your baseline existence. The multi-million-dollar mountain you thought you had to climb is a statistical fiction, pushed by an industry that wants to manage your assets. By factoring in these invisible assets, you reveal a safety net that has been there all along. You find that your survival is more secure and your actual wealth far greater than the balance in your banking app suggests.
67-year-old Mr. Trung spent his life working in a manufacturing plant. There were no high-stake stock trades or massive year-end bonuses, just a steady, quiet routine that continues today in this suburban house. If a financial planner looked at his bank statement, they would likely see a catastrophe. His total accumulated savings are so low that by every standard industry metric, he is standing on the edge of a retirement disaster. He has no significant portfolio to speak of and no liquid wealth to fall back on if things go wrong. On paper, he has spent 40 years failing to prepare. But Trung isn't panicking. He isn't checking the ticker at 3 a.m. or worrying about a market correction. He is operating under a logic that the standard retirement formulas aren't designed to measure. This logic is built on an income floor, a structural baseline of cash that arrives every month regardless of what happens in the global economy. Trung's floor rests on two pillars, a fixed state pension and a home that was paid off years ago. He has no mortgage, no interest payments, and no monthly weight of debt. His monthly guaranteed income is higher than his cost of living. Even when inflation or unexpected bills cause his expenses to rise, they rarely cross above that solid line of incoming cash. Because this system is automated, Trung never has to touch his savings. He doesn't need to sell anything to buy his groceries or pay the utility bill. While others worry about a stock market crash, Trung remains untouched. He isn't living on the value of his assets. He is living inside a fortress of cash flow. Mr. Fott lives in a pristine, modern home. He followed the wealth-building textbook, saving aggressively and hitting every milestone the financial world celebrates. On paper, Fott is a triumph. His net worth is in the millions, placing him in a bracket of wealth that most people would consider the ultimate definition of security. But in reality, Fott feels like he is walking on a thin layer of ice. Despite the millions, he is consumed by a constant, gnawing anxiety that never seems to leave his side. He reads the financial news with a physical weight in his chest. For Fott, a 3% dip in the market isn't just a number on a screen, it's a direct threat to his survival. His experience shows that a large net worth provides very little protection if it fails to produce a sense of peace. Fott is caught in a cycle of portfolio cannibalization. To fund his existence, he must continuously sell the assets he built. Squeezed by heavy liabilities like a massive mortgage and dependents, he shaves off his portfolio just to keep the lights on. This makes a market crash catastrophic. If the market drops, he is still forced to sell his shrinking assets at a loss to cover his bills, accelerating the depletion of his wealth. Fott hasn't built a retirement. He has entered a high-stakes race to see if his life ends before his balance reaches zero. When we place these two men side by side, the total number in the bank account starts to look like a secondary detail. Troon's income floor stands firm against the same economic pressures that are actively eroding Fott's pile of money. One man is protected by the structure of his finances, while the other is left exposed. Depending entirely on the sale of assets to survive turns a person into a hostage of market forces. You are only as safe as the latest ticker price allows you to be. Real security is found in the structural integrity of cash flow. It is the ability to cover the costs of life without being forced to dismantle your future to pay for your present. A high score on paper is a liability if it has no defense against the erosion of real life.
When you open a financial news site, you're often met with a single massive number, a retirement goal of $2 or $3 million. For most people, these figures feel less like a target and more like a barrier, creating a state of constant, low-level exhaustion. Reacting to these headlines with panic is a logically flawed strategy. When you try to hit a generic, perfect number designed for the masses, you ignore the specific variables that actually dictate your survival. You don't need to reach an arbitrary milestone to find safety. You simply need to define the exact mathematical limits of what you have and what you need. We use a framework called the survival ledger. It's a series of questions that strip away media-driven fear and replace it with your own objective reality. By moving from vague anxiety to personal mathematics, you regain control. The fear of the unknown is replaced by the clarity of a solvable problem. The first variable is the income floor. This is your guaranteed monthly inflows, Social Security, pensions, or rental income, that remains steady regardless of the stock market. To calculate this accurately, only count income legally guaranteed to hit your account every single month. The second variable is your actual expenses. Most online calculators tell you to replace 80% of your current salary, but that's a guess. You need to look at your real-world bills to see what your life actually costs. Be specific about the non-negotiables. Focus only on the strict essentials: property taxes, healthcare premiums, utilities, and your grocery budget. When you subtract your income floor from these core expenses, you isolate a specific deficit. We call this the gap. The purpose of your entire investment portfolio is simply to generate enough cash to fill this specific hole every month. If your guaranteed income covers most of your bills, the gap is small. And if the gap is small, the total amount of savings you need is significantly lower than what the standard industry models claim. Quantifying this deficit proves that retirement isn't an impossible macro crisis. It is a micro problem of balancing monthly cash flow. To see if your math holds up, we apply a stress test. Imagine a severe market crash occurring the very month you stop working. The drop in asset prices doesn't destroy a plan. The danger is being forced to sell stocks while down. But with a small gap, your income floor covers your life. You leave investments untouched, giving them time to recover without selling at a loss. You also have an invisible asset: flexibility. The ability to temporarily scale back discretionary spending during a downturn acts as a shock absorber for your portfolio. Finally, you have the variable of control. By choosing to delay Social Security or pension claims by even a few years, you mathematically lock in a much higher, inflation-adjusted income floor for life. Despite how effective this is, you will rarely find delaying benefits as the headline strategy in a wealth management brochure. This is because most advisors are paid through a fee based on the total value of your investment accounts. A larger Social Security check increases your security, but it doesn't increase the balance of the accounts they manage for a fee. Because the industry's incentives are tied to the size of your pile rather than the strength of your floor, the responsibility falls on you to prioritize the cash flow timing that actually protects your life. This is the core transition, moving from a mindset where wealth is an anchor, a heavy, static number you're chained to a mindset where safety is an aqueduct, providing a steady, reliable flow. When you stop chasing an endless total and start focus on the flow, the vague fear of not having enough disappears. You no longer have to spend your health and time trying to reach a finish line that someone else moved. Security isn't a prize for having the largest bank account. It's the result of solving the equation for your own life. Solving that equation gives you the most practical form of power, the ability to decide for yourself exactly when the work is finished. The real moment of liberation isn't when you become wealthy. It's the moment you realize your cash flow is structured well enough for you to safely step off the wheel.